Dámy a pánové, tady je Sara Polák a vítám vás u dalšího dílu Paioneers Talks. Dneska to bude v angličtině, protože jsme bilinguální, cloudový, globální pořad a sleduje nás minimálně 5 lidí, ne, já vím, že je vás víc, už skoro 2,5 tisíce, takže mám obrovskou radost a děkuju. So let's switch into English because we've been discussing a lot of different topics lately. We've been discussing the role of technology in music, in architecture, in astrophysics. We've been discussing the Large Hadron Collider, space, satellites, lasers, everything. One thing that we haven't discussed, like throughout the probably 45 episodes that we've already got, is fashion. And you might think, look, there's a crisis on, there's inflation. What did fashion ever do for us? Like that quote from Life of Brian. And actually, we are going to look at fashion not only from a historical perspective, but also have a look at how technologies from artificial intelligence, the metaverse, they might sound like buzzwords, but they're genuinely things that are shaping the way we live and also shaping the way we look. And I think that through this symbiosis, we'll get a whole new perspective on the technology and society theme that we're discussing here throughout our existence of Paioneers Talks. And to help me with this complex topic is a friend that I actually met, speaking of history, at a historically but futuristically themed conference, NF Castle, that was organized by Will Lobkowitz. If you, by the way, want to have a look at the part we did with Will, with the interview, please have a look at it because we've done that last year. So it's one definitely worth watching. But it was a conference that not only introduced me to the beauty of NFTs and blockchain and Ethereum and all that in more detail, but also introduced me to the lovely Nataliya Grimberg, who's our, how do you say, guest? Yeah, sorry, wow, this is... That's a good way of doing a talk show when you can't think of the word for guest. That's good. But Nataliya, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you so much for being on our program.
Thank you so much for inviting. So first of all, I know that some people might have some misconceptions about fashion, thinking it's something that's very, on the edge of being superficial, but actually fashion is a mirror of our society. And as you mentioned, history. Throughout history, you could say all the different styles that have been evolving. And it's not just a coincidence that fashion goes hand in hand with all the technological advancements and societal changes. It really reflects who we are as society. And even if someone thinks that fashion has nothing to do with their life, it has the very direct consequences in everything that they're doing.
Absolutely. So. Yes, you're absolutely right. And I want to poke into the history of it a little bit more because, I mean, you can't see it now, but Nataliya's got a beautiful, antique sculpture-like looking dress underneath. And also you've got 3D printed earrings of David that you can see in Florence. So you're definitely in touch with the historical roots, but you also kind of project that into the future. You call yourself a fashion futurist. So I'm curious how you got into fashion in the first place. What kind of got you hooked? What interests you in it? Because you're far from superficially involved. You're taking it very seriously as a concept. And what kind of brought you to mix it so seamlessly with tech? Where that motivation came from?
So David is actually very symbolic. When I was a little kid, my mother is an interior designer, so she always was into arts and visual representation of every different aspect of arts. And we had a lot of art albums in our home. And my favorite one, I believe I was 2 or 3, I was a really little kid, was the one that had all the antique sculptures, including Michelangelo's David. I was a little kid, I was opening up the book, looking at all these statues and thinking how they were created back then. And now, 20 years later, I believe I did those 9 years ago. It was one of my first 3D printing experiments. I basically went to a souvenir store where they had different sculptures, and I made a 3D scan back when it was just starting to be, just available app in the phone. I have scanned the head of David and I have 3D printed that. After that, I made the first 3D printed collection in the Czech Republic, and my fascination with the different technology started like that. I have studied fashion design since my high school, but I've always been implementing all the different aspects of tech. So 3D printing, then I've started to make my own programs. I've started to code. I was a bit of a geek girl, so I tried to learn how to make my AI tools before any tools like Midjourney or DALL-E were available. available. So 8 years ago, I've programmed my first Gen AI tool to create prints for my fashion collection. I have fed it with tons of different pictures. I'm a fan of the space and also the underwater world. So I have fed it with thousands of pictures that I have found that were publicly available for usage to train my model. And based on that, I have trained the AI model to then create a print.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's one of the things I admire about you so much, because obviously now, you know, like AI has become a massive, massive thing. Everyone keeps talking about it. You know, NFTs 2 years ago, they were a massive boom. People didn't know why, but they wanted them. It's like the standard like bubble concept. But I really admire you in the sense that you didn't go after the hype, but you really kind of explored how concretely the technology can help, how it can augment. And, you know, fashion has always been we're in a world where we have wearable tech, where you have almost like technological, like purposeful fashion, where, for example, I was once working with a company who did kind of covers for phones that were completely like disrupting the signal, basically like a Faraday cage. So like there's even like for like the crypto anarchist community or for the hacker community, there's a lot of like fashion gadgets that actually have a kind of meaning as well. So you started using all these tools before it was cool. And I would really like to see your perspective in that regard on how you feel that technology is being integrated into fashion now. You just came fresh from Milan Fashion Week, where you saw Madonna, which is amazing. I'm here with, you know, someone famous, all right? Like be happy for me. And I'm just curious how fashion, which is very trend oriented, is jumping on the bandwagon of technologies, and what your perspective on that is.
Yeah, so going back to Milan Fashion Week, yes, I saw Madonna. She was 1 meter from me. I could not believe my eyes. She looked like a hologram, and hopefully soon we'll have the technology.
She probably is at this stage.
We'll have the technology to have all the famous people in front of us as holograms, and we would be able to talk to them, maybe some AI brains, and a hologram Madonna to talk to her about her, for instance, inspiration for the collection that she co-created with Dolce & Gabbana. So I was at the show of D&G, and they were creating the collection that paid heritage to everything that Madonna wore back in the 90s, you know, the cone-shaped bras and all the things that Jean-Paul Gaultier was introducing back then. And I was there because I had a project with D&G. 2 years ago, we were creating NFT wearables for their NFT holders. So they have, in my opinion, some of the most interesting NFT collections that fashion brands have introduced. It's basically an entrance to the world of D&G. They're called D&G Family. They gather together in Milan a couple of times a year when the shows are happening. They go to dinners together. They meet Domenico Dolce and Stefano Gabbana. And everything about this community is extremely friendly. They are all sharing their love to fashion, the future. And I was happy to also introduce some of the digital fashion to them that they could then wear in Central and in other metaverses during the fashion weeks and beyond.
So you mentioned two important themes or topics, which is the metaverse, which I'm fascinated by the metaverse because we discussed this in a previous discussion. It was like on the cusp of being like a massive thing, like everyone was talking about the metaverse, and then suddenly it kind of died off. I think, like, you know, from even a perspective of like an archaeologist, evolutionary anthropologist, we're discussing using the metaverse as like a simulation playground for like how humans behave. And like, you know, you can create, again, for me as an archaeologist, like you can create museums there, galleries, you know, so for me, it's like a phenomenal, like digital twin of our society that we can play a lot of cool games and experiments in. But to my interest, like, it's something that like relatively died off. With the NFTs as well, it's such a shame that it's seen as such a scam, like amongst people, because obviously, like, it's not just a picture of a monkey, like, and we need to demystify that, and you're doing that really well. It's actually just a token that cannot be changed, it cannot be erased, and you don't just have to tokenize art, but you can tokenize various acts of behavior, various types of capital, from social capital to artistic capital, whatever that might be. In the fashion industry, I can imagine it's really interesting from the perspective of maybe like idea cementing and like intellectual property like protection, but we'll get to that. But if you could just explain those two phenomena that were kind of like a adoption disappointment almost with NFT and metaverse, and how you use them in the fashion world, because you do it a hell of a lot and you do it really well. So I'm just keen to learn.
I feel like it's almost now a negative word when someone is using the word metaverse. No one wants to believe you because it sounds like a scam. It's just was a very high hopes into the technology, and it didn't meet the expectations of the general crowd. Us from the industry, we know that the technology is still being built. We don't have the tech yet. We don't have the hardware itself that would support virtual world building. But very soon, with the emergence of AI, we'll be able to build our own words seamlessly with just a text prompt. So it's a matter of time and a matter of how quickly hardware also adapts the software metaverse. So you've probably heard that the Meta has now canceled the filters on Instagram.
Oh, I didn't even realize that. Really?
Yes. So I don't know how some of the Instagram users are going to continue using Instagram without the filters. It will be a challenge for some. So they have discontinued since January 14, I think, 2025. They will unfortunately close all the filter platform that supports creators that have been working on it for so many years. Even I, 6 years ago, I had a collection that was purely black. It was a capsule collection that anyone can have in the wardrobe, very sustainable, just a couple of basic pieces. But with AR filter that I have created, you could wear any kind of print on top of that virtually.
Yeah.
And those filters will go away. I'll have to probably record it just for the reference for archives of what fashion could be back then.
Yeah.
But I believe they did it for a very economically practical reason, because Meta didn't introduce their hardware that would be compatible with it yet. But you've seen that during the recent Meta Connect, Mark already wore the Orion glasses, which are about to change how we're going into the metaverse and the reality. So those were not the usual headset that lets you go into VR, because so far we see that it's mainly good for gamers, but we're not really going to disappear into the virtual world really, hopefully anytime soon, because the world is beautiful and we want to explore the real world, but with enhancements. And that's why they're introducing the Orion glasses. They have this holographic technology, which means that you can see the real world with a digital overlay. And based on that, they will reintroduce the AR filter technology, but they want to connect their own hardware to that. That's my theory why they discontinue that, because before that you have someone else's smartphone and you can use the tag for free, and now they see that they can introduce the headset, the glasses that people will be buying instead of smartphones, and use AR for that.
So because this is fascinating, so because they understand like the ego of people, and they understand like the need of people to play, and exactly as you say, like experiment and experience with different realities, like without actually becoming that reality, but seeing what it would be like, you know. So for me, you know, I've so many times like fantasized what would it be like if I went like properly platinum blonde, but I don't have the guts to do it, right? But like even that kind of simple thing of experimenting with your visage is fascinating. But obviously that's really interesting from the adoption standpoint, because people are not going to get there with VR. We've already tested that's not going to happen. So you basically need to kick them off social media by taking their ego candy away and shifting them towards the Orion. That is interesting. So for in terms of fashion, so the metaverse, we're going to have much more of an augmented reality probably than a virtual one. So the metaverse is much more going to be rooted in the real world, which I agree with you, and is going to be fascinating in that regard. How does the blockchain technology kind of come into that? I know it's a separate project, but it's another thing that was like a bit of a disappointment, or that people just use. There was a lot of scams. There was a lot of people speculating with it to basically go and buy a Lambo. And that's not the point of NFTs originally. So how do you work with that concept? Because again, you're not new to it.
I feel like with the bear market, the whole scope of Web3 has already cleared up. So yes, we had a lot of scams. We had a lot of amazing projects. But after the bear market, the crisis in crypto came, the market kind of cleared itself, and it only is going to evolve more, but with a more stable path. We had this WAGMI, we're all going to make it, the whole movement of the crypto guys that are no matter what going to build a new future of the internet, Web3. And I am with them on the point that yes, Web3 backed by blockchain is going to be the next iteration of the internet. Even when we see how Meta has behaved towards creators that have been working for free, basically for the platform by creating all the content, all the beautiful AR filters, and now they are left with nothing. Probably all the creators and people that do any kind of content on the internet will realize that anything that is not owned by them is owned by someone else. And blockchain will allow us to bring back the ownership, to bring back the ownership of creation to everyone who is using the platforms, not just for themselves, but for others, but not for the conglomerates that are only gaining the...
I love that. I love that because, so you know, this is my obsession as an archaeologist, right? I try to think in like waves as little, you know, I always think, oh yeah, I get it now, and then I realize that I don't actually know anything, but I'm trying. And with the internet, it's interesting how first kind of it got introduced as actually, a matter of fact, in CERN, like that was one of the origins. Have a look at the episode with Martin Rybář, who's an astrophysicist in CERN. It's a really good one to watch. But it was for sharing information. So like we have the kind of the first step is like, you know, sharing information, and we've got the second step where we kind of take it away from the state, and is this kind of like first emancipation and like the pseudo democratization of, I can do my own stuff and I can film my dog and make money of it, and like how amazing is this? But we're, I think, getting to the, exactly as you say, the kind of sobering up point where we think, wait, if it's free, then I'm the product. Like it's if something is, it's like Inglourious Basterds. Like if something is too good to be true, it ain't. So I think people are now waking up to the fact, even, you know, with the big changes that have been happening with, you know, America thinking about banning TikTok, Instagram, you know, for example, having an outage, and suddenly you realize the memories of the last 10 years of mine are gone. My online identity is gone. There being creators that have been, you know, wrongly or rightly involved in some kind of controversy. Like one of the ones like I love and watch for like the last decade is like PewDiePie, for example. Like the way that YouTube has been demonetizing him, etc. You know, you start realizing that your creation is not your own. For this, go have a look at the episode. Sorry, I've got to make all these nifty connections, but with Andras from Galaxis, who we also had an interview with online, who was saying that we got into a stage where attention equals value, not value equals value. And what you beautifully said just now is that in Web3, we're getting to that kind of decentralization. It's like, okay, we don't really trust the state to do things for us. We don't actually trust the big corporates either, and we want to like have that ownership. So in terms of fashion, bringing that back into fashion, how do you see, for example, blockchain playing out in that world, or Web3 in general?
So if we go back to Lobkovic's event. So back then I have created a digitalized avatar based on some of their collections. So as you know, they have a massive art collection, and there are portraits of hundreds of beautiful, noble people that haven't been really introduced to us in the 21st century. And I feel that archiving pieces, some of the portraits into the metaverse as a blockchain-based art piece can, again, put this connection between what is owned by a state, what is owned by a private art collector. We had a painting of Lady Medici. We put her in the metaverse in Somnium Space. We've built the whole 3D look. I have created the dress that she was wearing, but in a more futuristic way. And during the event, maybe you've seen it, you could try on her avatar or go around in the metaverse in virtual reality. And she is backed on blockchains, which means that if there is a collector who's going to buy this avatar, this virtual portrait, you will have the traceability of the art piece, and you'll never have the situation when someone takes your art and you'll never find it back. I know the Lobkovich family had some hard times to gaining back their art pieces after many regimes that were here in the Czech Republic, and they had some printed papers to support the case that they really were the owners of these art pieces. And with blockchain, it's much easier to showcase the ownership because, as you know how blockchain works, you can never delete, you can never erase information about the piece. And that's something that also goes into more the fashion industry, digital product passports that are about to kick in the whole Europe. So there was a new introduction of having fashion, any fashion that is being imported or created in the European Union has to have digital product passports by, they say, 2026.
Okay.
In July of this year, they have already introduced a new reform. It's called a reform on eco-design for sustainable products, which basically means that every company, not just fashion company, but anyone that's producing different products, including fashion, will have to have this. It can be blockchain-based, it doesn't have to be, but I feel that blockchain will definitely help with the traceability of it. Digital product passport to each of the product that is being sold in European Union. So that will include all the information, all the data from where the fibers were created, where the fabrics were coming from, where it was produced on, where the patterns were cut, until the very final customer in the stores, so that you could be able to see which brands are having a clean pipeline of production and who are, making it, messing it up with the supply chain.
That is interesting, and you just mentioned a beautiful thing that it's almost like you're reading my mind. We're so connected. But you mentioned a really interesting thing, because at the start we kind of demystified fashion a little bit, and it's unfortunate that when you look at Vogue or the Met Gala or whatever, increasingly because of the kind of social pressures that are happening now, like inflation, people have a huge mistrust towards corporations, the state. There's a lot going on in society, and I think, unfortunately, a lot of the communication around fashion has been, relatively elitist, relatively kind of like expulsionary, that like, unless you're like in the world, you can't really partake because we know better than you and you dress like shit kind of thing. And you're one of the people that has really helped explain to me, you don't come into it like with an air of snobbery, quite the opposite. With technology, you bring fashion closer to people. And it's not just about, buying the next like t-shirt or like, having a good picture in Vogue. It's about also things like supply chains and like jobs for people. In the Czech Republic alone, where my grandma comes from the Sudetenland, in Orlické Hory, beautiful. Visit Orlické Hory. But there's an area called Náchod, and another noble family used to be there. Again, obviously everything stolen from them thanks to the various regimes. But they used to own the textile factories. Similarly, where Tomáš Mikolov comes from in Šumperk. Again, watch our episode with Tomáš Mikolov. They used to live from textile, and textile was a huge thing, both obviously in the Czech Republic, Austro-Hungarian Empire, but the silk being traded like during the Silk Road, like the Romans did that. So like the trading of fabrics, of materials, of like giving jobs is a huge part of our society, and it's that aspect of fashion where on one hand you have this group of people waving the sustainability flag, but on the other they don't, I feel, often go into depth of how we're technologically actually going to achieve that. You mentioned the kind of aspect of provenance tracking, which is fascinating on its own. But I also remember we had a couple of discussions about using things like AI for the optimization of supply chains, and using that fusion of like AI and blockchain for making sure that the whole process works. That the big companies don't do the thing where they claim to be sustainable and then have sweatshops in China. So how do you perceive the more, let's say, process and operations driven side of fashion? Why should we care?
Yeah, so for now, with some of the companies I'm working with, as you mentioned, AI is using to optimize some of the processes. I do trend forecasting, and even within the trend forecasting area, I'm using AI a lot to gather a huge amount of data that a human brain cannot really transform into something digestible. So I have a lot of data from the companies. I'm using some of the AI tools that we have built either together, or some of my AI tools that I have built back then when I was a programming girl. And we're using all the amounts of data from supply chain, from the production, to analyze whether the clothes even have to be produced. Because with the emergence of digital fashion, 3D visualization, we can already create 3D models of clothing that look exactly like real ones, to test out the audience, to test out if there is any customers that are actually wanting to buy the pieces before they're being produced, to obviously reduce the amount amount of money and resources that are being used for production of even samples. Just sampling itself is, I believe, taking over 11% of overall textile garbage every year.
Wow.
And the overall amounts of garbage that is being put on the landfills from textile industry itself is 95 million tons of textile garbage. And if that textile garbage was compostable or recyclable is one thing, but because most of the fast fashion production is now based on polyester and other fibers that will not really recompose themselves after thousands of years, we are quite in trouble. That's why it's really good to go back at least to organic materials and fibers that are going to compose themselves, let's say, in 100 years instead of 1,000. And there is a lot of advancements and innovations that field. You can buy already some, let's say, shoes that are made from mycelium, a bag that's made from a pineapple tree, and some other things that are made from biodegradable materials. Those are very new, and they unfortunately cost more than anything that you can buy that's made of polyester, because the research takes time and money. But I believe that if we have more people that are actually looking into the inside of the garments, what they're made of and how they're going to be then post-processed after the garment is not worn anymore, we will probably see a solution. And with DPPs as well, they also have to write down how you can compose or recycle or upcycle the garments that you're buying before the purchase. You'll know what you can do with that. Some brands will offer repairment services to have more people that are buying from them, because that's one of the simplest things that you can do if the garment is not wearable because there is some mistake or defect. You can put it back to the brand and they will repair it instead of putting that in the garbage right away, which is a system that we are used now. Right? If we have something that has a hole in there, no one really can sew it by hand anymore. During the time when our mothers were young and were trying out different fashion styles, they were making it themselves. They actually knew the craft, and nowadays it's really hard to even do the simple thing of sewing in a sock that's been torn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the way that you approach it, that it's not like because like, often in the past you'd own one dress and like you really look after it, and as you say, like kind of repair it, etc. But it's not necessarily because people were, so sustainable that they were poor, right? And they didn't have enough materials. I think what we, because one of the things that in terms of like civilizational resilience that we're kind of discussing and thinking about is sustainability, but not from like the green political perspective where it's used to kind of, it's greenwashing essentially, but really try to think about, because I was horrified with myself as well. Like sometimes you buy something and you think actually nah, and then like you might feel good that you pass it on to charity, but really you're just like passing it down the supply chain and you don't know where it's going to end up, and it's probably going to end up on a landfill anyway. So like having sustainability as a choice and not as a necessity out of poverty, I think is really important. And the fact that people always want to look good, like the ancient Egyptians did that, like the Neanderthals, there's like, evidence of them like adorning themselves with shells and ochre. So people are always going to be vain, and that's good and that's fine. Like that's one of the things that we do, and it's so symbolic about like, Homo sapiens, that we love to express ourselves. But how to do that sustainably and how to make it make sense and not have those knock-on effects is interesting. I have another question, because you mentioned the different materials that we can make this out of. We've kind of covered, AI, blockchain, metaverse, 3D printing. I'd like to go back to the more material science aspect of fashion, because we went on this was like 2 years ago, we went to Ethiopia, and they were using like banana leaf fibers to create, for example, menstrual pads for women. So that's a really interesting byproduct of experimenting with different materials. How do you see the materials in fashion being used going forward? Because like, we had the dress with Bella Hadid that was like sprayed on. Everyone was like, oh my God, that's amazing. There's obviously kind of like fashion in terms of like trekking and mountain climbing where you wanted to have certain properties. You 3D print beautifully a lot. So what do you think is the future of the material science of things, or like what interests you about that?
Speaking of the tribe that was using bananas for the fabrics and the fibers, there is already a company, it's called Banana Tex. They're producing this textile made of banana. But it's now more on a manufacturing level, obviously. So I think we have to look back into the past of what was used back then without all the oil that wasn't found back then and wasn't used to create all the polyester and nylon things. We have to look back into how our grandmas or grandmothers were using linen or other natural fibers that we have here locally. We don't have to go to other countries to source for silk or for cotton. If we had some fibers that were grown naturally in the area where we already live without having to have higher footprints from bringing the material to fiber to one production to another all around the globe. Because even if something is organic, doesn't mean that it has a low carbon footprint. Because you can have production of the fiber in one part of the world, then you have a factory in Italy that's producing the fabric, then it goes back to China to have the fabric sewn, and then it goes back to the final customer. So the overall carbon footprint might be even higher. Doesn't matter what the fiber is. So we really have to think how we could do it locally. Speaking of Bella Hadid, she was at I believe it was a Caperni show, and their recent fashion show happened last week. It was in Disneyland. It was a huge, marvelous spectacle. Yes,
I saw that on Instagram.
And I really love the brand because every time they are experimenting with the newest technology. Last season, they had the bag that was made from aerogel, which is a NASA-made material, and their bag was the largest physical thing that was ever created out of this cosmic structure that's used for some research by NASA. This season, at the Disneyland show, they had another bag which was printed with another new 3D printing technology. It's called rapid liquid printing, and it basically means that you're printing into a gel. The gel itself holds the form, so you ingest the silicon, the bag was made of silicon, you ingest this silicon fiber into the gel, you create the form, and then you take it out of the gel, which means how the normal 3D printing process works, you have to have a couple of things that are printed extra just to support the whole system, and then you have to get rid of it and throw it away, or if you are a good printer, then you recycle it into specific organizations. But without that, without having to need to print extra layers of support, printing directly into a gel is another new technology that's been evolved, and I'm really looking forward to see how it's going to be used in the fashion industry. Because yes, fashion industry seems like is an industry that's adapting all the new technologies and trends as the first industry out of all, but that's actually not true. We are waiting for medical and military industries to create some of the solutions, and then it's been used for fashion as a secondary market. Before that, let's say I've worked with Tesla suit, which is a full-body haptic suit, which for the metaverse and for some of the things that I have been creating for activations in the metaverse means that you put the suit on, you walk in the metaverse, and you feel different sensations that are in the metaverse. If it's windy, you feel the wind. If someone is kicking you, you feel someone is kicking you. So you have this 5D, 6D sensation in the metaverse. But originally, the system of the suit was created to train in military and also to create other implications within medical devices. And speaking of medical, another beautiful project that I had a pleasure working on was first created by medical organizations. We're working with MSD research, and we have created this T-shirt that was taking the EKG signals from little kids' bodies, because you know how usually EKG is being measured. It's a big machine. Kids cannot wear it to school without being too self-conscious about it. And we have created this fiber that was putting the signals directly into a little magnetic battery that they're wearing in the pocket. That was quite discreet. And with that technology, we could then use the same tech for the sportswear, which then goes more into fashion again. So yes, sportswear is another area where all the innovations have been happening. There was this shoe that has been 3D printed directly onto a form of someone's feet that has been 3D scanned, 3D printed, and then the shoe was 3D printed all over for this specific athlete. So it fits 110% better than all the other shoes that have been created for them.
This is incredible. Like I love this. This is why I love having this program. I don't know why I call it a program, like it's a cooking program, but this is exactly it. Because like you take something like fashion that I know clearly very little about.
True, not true.
I'm like a Matrix from Wish, but anyway, speaking of ineffective and unsustainable practices and clothes, I had to mention Wish, but what you're talking about, the technology transfer is phenomenal. And even just if we look into again history, like the role of obviously the cotton industry, like in the United States of America, has a very very dark and horrible past. But if you look at like how these industries really shaped the social fabric, like the creation of burlap sacks for manufacturing. I was talking to someone about canvas, how actually it's used canvas. It's called canvas etymologically because of cannabis. And one of the things that Napoleon was like really concerned about during his kind of siege of Europe was basically the trade of cannabis and using it to make like specific sails for ships. So there's like all like this incredible kind of connection where, for example, if you do use like cannabis-based textiles in hospitals, like the level of infections can go down dramatically. So it's experimenting with these different materials, with these different approaches, and them not just being like on the runway for the select few, but actually dramatically changing the way we live, the way we manufacture, package. It's everything kind of comes together. And the sportswear, it's funny that you mentioned the wearables, because well, not now, but I fence, and I love fencing, although I'm not great. And one of the things, because we were so excited that the Czech team won a bronze medal in the Olympics. Yeah, like awesome. That was great. The men's épée team. And me and my trainer were talking like a couple of years back. And one of the ways that fencers, for example, train, because like you keep maybe making the same mistakes, etc. But fencing now happens so quickly that just like looking at it, you have no chance of, like, unless you go very slow motion, of really detecting where they got you, how quickly, etc. And we were actually talking, I mean, we didn't really take it anywhere, it was just an idea, but with the University of Liberec, because they're big on nanotechnology and nanofibers, and basically like having this like nano mesh in the t-shirt, and basically like having like pressure receptors. So wherever you get kind of stabbed, you can then train using artificial intelligence to predict like what your movements should be to anticipate the movement of the of your foe. You can train it on particular people that you fence with. And I mean, this is sci-fi, and I doubt anyone's going to invest that much money in fencing. Like, that's not the use case to make your millions. But obviously fencing is not the only way that can be used, right? So I love like how you connect all of those things. Nataliya, I'm curious, because unfortunately we'll have to take this to a close. As much as I need to talk to you more, we need to hang out. But you are, as I mentioned, you're a fashion futurist. You really are an early adopter. You're very kind of no bullshit about these things, which I really admire, and I admire you for what you do. In terms of fashion and your kind of work, what are the projects that you're currently now working on, and you've got in your head that you can tell us about? Where can people find you? And I've got one more question, but I won't pile them on. So just these two things that I'll ask for the last one.
So that's actually exclusive information. I haven't been talking about that on any of the podcasts before. I'm opening an agency.
Nice.
It will be called Haute Couture.
Wonderful.
And we will focus on everything that I've been focusing on throughout my career, but now it will have a name. Because usually for people, it's much easier to see you under a company than under just the name itself. So I wanted to give it a name, to give it a form. And I'll be creating the same fashion tech solutions I've been doing before, but on a larger scale. I am going to research more into the future of fibers, the future of 3D printing, because when I started the 3D print 9 years ago, I kind of hope that it will evolve throughout time. I came back to the industry 9 years later and nothing has changed. So I see big potential and a big leap in where we can go now with the technologies that we're having, but it hasn't really been used in fashion anywhere else. I am working on some of the projects with augmented reality because, again, I believe that we will not escape into virtual worlds, but we will want to enhance what we already have in the physical reality. So one of the things we're working is AR try-on mirror. You've probably seen that at the Digitalny Česko at the conference, where you can just stand in front of the mirror, it's a screen, and try on different garments. Some of the brands want to have that in the stores because it's making the process of selecting clothes easier. For some, it's just a great way to create new content without having to buy new clothes every time. Artificial intelligence is a big thing, and it's something that I've been using throughout different campaigns with brands. One of my favorite campaigns that I have created recently was with Preciosa. We have created a trend book for 2025 with this campaign. The campaign was shot in virtual production studios. So that's the place where Mandalorian or avatars were shot. So it's a big LED screen, and we had our models being immersed in the virtual wonderland. We had our Alice standing in front of not a green screen where she couldn't really be familiar with space, so she could really be immersed in the meta wonderland. And we created a campaign, photos, videos with the crystals, with AI generated prints. The whole environment was generated with AI and then brought to life with animation, again with different AI tools. So I'm exploring how we can connect, maybe create agents that will connect different tools to create a seamless experience and seamless way on how to produce fashion content and products.
That's fantastic. And thank you. That's like a little present for me, like that this exclusive content could launch here. I didn't even know that, and I'm really proud of you. And I completely know what you mean if, like, you put everything under an umbrella that people tend to understand better. We're simple animals, but congratulations. That is an awesome feat. And after this, you'll send me the link and we'll put it underneath so you know where to go. The plans sound great, but it's nothing that you haven't accomplished before, so I'm sure it'll go fantastically. One last question. You're a fashion futurist. I don't want you to predict from a crystal ball, because we always predict something for the future and then it turns out completely different. But what is the technology that you feel like most emotion towards, that you're really excited about in the fashion world, and what do you think it will bring to humanity or to fashion or society in general?
So we hear about AI everywhere now. I feel like there has been 10 conferences just in the Czech Republic itself in the previous month, but I still feel that AI is really going to accelerate every other industry. Even for 3D printing, AI is going to accelerate how we create those 3D models. We'll be able to prompt it in and to print it out from the worth our home. AI will help on the sustainability issues as well, with all the analytical tools that are backed by AI. Brands will be able to really predict what they should sell and produce instead of trying out, making mistakes, putting the unsold garments to the landfill. With AI, every sector of fashion industry is really going to thrive. So as unoriginal it may sound, AI is the future, and in every aspect, even when I'm just thinking what to wear. Today, I was asking my special ChatGPT check that's trained to tell me how I should dress for the event. It asked who I'm going to talk to. I said it's an AI tech archaeologist, and we're going to talk about fashion. That's why I'm having the antique 3D printed everything, and every normal human being will be able to train their own AI models to anything they would need. And I think it's only going to make us as a humanity much more powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about the technology transfer between industries as well that I think is fascinating. And you've really shown us that today beautifully. and you look great. And please tell your ChatGPT agent that I really appreciate it, because I was like, oh, the 3D printed David. Oh, I'm so happy. So you made me happy. Ladies and gentlemen, fashion, AI, the metaverse, crypto, blockchain, pretty much everything we've discussed today. But what I think that Nataliya really encompasses beautifully is putting all of that together in a non-pretentious, non-fast fashion kind of way, but like really looking at the principles that can be lifted from fashion and taken pretty much anywhere else. So I hope that you're as excited about this episode as I am. We will put all of the notes and links to all the fantastic projects underneath. Please also watch the other episodes that I've been mentioning throughout. Follow Nataliya because she's doing phenomenal work and showcasing it beautifully on ye older internet, web 2.0, but it's fine. Like you'll find her on Instagram and everywhere. So and plus she's launching her new agency. So I'm really proud of you. I'm really honored that you came to talk to us about this. You look fantastic and you do fantastic things. So thank you so much. And I hope that you will thrive in the future and keep bringing all these wonderful technologies with everything that they've got to the fashion world and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for inviting. After the podcast, I'll tell us some more secrets in fun fashion, especially David. But that would be for your hero.
That'll be for my eyes only. So, ladies and gentlemen, maybe some next time. Until then, I'll see you. Enjoy the episode and enjoy the next one as well. Take care. Bye.